Yeah. Hi, Alyssa. Hi, Alyssa.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you. How are you feeling?
Meet you too. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
Oh, yeah. No, my leg is
I
getting better.
am wonderful. How about
Yeah.
yourself?
I'm doing good. It's just a minor inconvenience. Thankfully, I didn't break my head.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, I
Yes.
broke my leg. Just
You
a little,
you said your knee, right?
I broke a little piece of my knee, an avulsion fracture of the medium collateral ligament. So I got away with a brace.
Okay. Thank
I'm
goodness.
lucky.
Yeah. Are you in a lot of pain?
Really? No. If I put my leg up most of the time and I can walk on it, it's better than I hoped for.
Oh, thank goodness.
Now, one thing for the background, because we're doing video too, right?
Yes.
Behind you is a door. If you can close it.
So give me 1 second. I'm gonna try to close it. We just moved, so my house is a little bit
That's
awry. So
completely fine.
give me 1 minute. I'm just gonna try to
Legal
close it.
woodwork.
1 second.
That's a pretty dog. No, please pet. I love that. I love dogs. Let me put ours up. Where's Rudy? Rudy, where are you?
Okay. Is that better?
Much better.
Okay, perfect.
Let me see, where's my therapy dog? I wanted him as a therapy dog, but it didn't work out. He didn't have the character for it.
What kind of dog is he?
He's a Pomeranian.
Oh,
We had Pomeranians before, and they were just the sweetest and nicest dogs. And I wanted an emotional support dog. Yeah, right. Rudy is not the right one. He has PTSD himself, so good topic. I'm sure he does because he is aggressive. He's anxious aggressive.
Anxious aggressive?
Yeah, we had to train him very carefully and give him medication actually to keep him level.
Really?
Never had a dog like that. And he started as a puppy. We had him to several trainers and said, well, when it starts so early, there has to be something genetic or something must have happened to him. Somebody dropped him. I mean, we picked him from the litter. We know the breeder. She's a sweetheart. I don't know what happened. Oh, but you know, him. He's a good dog other than when he has a moment.
Right. Other than his moments, he's beautiful. How old is he?
2 years now.
He's a baby.
He's no longer biting much, but in the beginning, we are full of scars. This is all from him. This is all from him. Yeah, that was a nice one here. You even can see that it's a dog bite.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have a few more on my body where he caught me.
Wow, he bit you badly.
He drew blood. It's not just a nib.
Right, that's a bite.
I've never had a dog like that. Never, ever. That bit his owners.
No, I've never.
And we didn't beat him. We had to get an e-collar and get trained ourselves to use it properly, to communicate better with him. He's smart and stubborn. Okay, he's a good dog though. Now he's getting there.
He's getting there.
Topic: PTSD in dogs. Does it exist? Yeah. I believe it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dogs bite, people bite. So
yes.
This, of course, is recorded. And what we'll do is for the show, I'll just introduce yourself. I'll introduce you and quickly, and then I'll let you introduce yourself further.
Perfect.
And talk about why you're so passionate about PTSD. And then you can talk about, of course, your own story. And it's such an important topic. And it's I mean, everybody has some trauma, and everybody does.
Exactly. Some level of trauma. Exactly.
So are you busy these days as a therapist?
Very busy. It's, everybody is really
COVID damaged.
Yes. Yeah. I think so many people have PTSD, some type of PTSD just from COVID,
Watching the news gives them PTSD.
Yes, the news. Turn off the news. It's not good.
When COVID started, I couldn't believe it. An old person died from COVID. And our premier of the province where I live in Nova Scotia, he went in the news and said, I'm so sorry about your loved one dying. And I thought, if that person had died from cancer, he wouldn't even have mentioned it.
Not at all.
What's the difference?
Yep. We're not sorry when people die from cancer.
That's weird, isn't it?
It's very weird. It's very weird.
And the same, the people that had to go to the hospital with COVID, they paid for their ambulance fares. A good friend of ours was diagnosed with cancer. He had to pay all 4 of his ambulance bills himself. How is that fair?
It's sickening. That is infuriating.
Yeah, so there's little things that upset people. And
yes.
Sometimes it's hard to stay positive when the media comes at you like that.
The media is very depressing and you can't get away from it. It's not even just on your TV, it's on your phone, it's on your computer, it's everywhere.
Yeah. All righty, let's get started.
Okay.
Power pose. I always tell my clients, what's your power move?
Power move.
Yeah, all righty. Okay. Hi, folks. It's Dr. Christine Sauer. Welcome to my show, Your Quality of Life, Healthy Alternatives. And today I'm extremely happy to have Alyssa Scolari. Do I pronounce it right?
You sure did.
On my show. Alyssa is a licensed therapist who specializes in trauma and eating disorder recovery in her private practice. She's also the host of the Light After Trauma podcast, which is meant to be an informative, inspirational, and safe space for those looking for support as they navigate the difficult yet extremely rewarding journey of recovering from trauma. Welcome, Alyssa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. It's such an important and timely topic. PTSD, trauma. Why are you so passionate about that topic?
That is a wonderful question. So I have always been very passionate about mental health, especially even as a child, small child, have always been passionate about it. And looking back, I didn't understand at the time, but the reason why I was so passionate about it is because I struggled with it myself so much. And then when I got older into my 20s, I realized that I myself had a history of trauma that was masked with an eating disorder. And I think just through my own trauma recovery and the work that I've done, and I am diagnosed with complex PTSD. So I think that with that is how it inspired me to then go ahead and say, okay, I need to help others through this.
Wow. Now, Alyssa, that was very generic, and my listeners always want to hear the juicy details. Can you elaborate what kind of trauma, and or is it too much? When it's too much, I don't want to trigger anything.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm very comfortable talking about it. So I have a history of childhood sexual abuse and domestic violence. So I've had multiple abusers across my lifetime, beginning when I was probably about 4 or 5 and lasting up until I was about 24 or 25. So about 20 years, and I'm 29 now. So I'm about 4, almost 5 years removed from it.
Congratulations in one way. And I'm sorry to
have
lasted so long on the other side. But it is more common than people want to believe.
It really is. And the more often it happens, the more likely it is to continue to happen. So, when it happens one time, that increases the likelihood of sexual abuse happening again and again and again. And that's not just necessarily for sexual abuse. That also can be for, domestic violence, abusive relationships, all types of trauma.
Now, I heard from some clients, and I read about it, of course, that many children that experience sexual abuse blame themselves and say there must be something in me that they do it to me, or it's okay that they're doing it. They must know what they are doing. How did you experience that abuse growing up until you realized it's not okay?
Yeah, that is the nitty gritty of the work that I think that I do with so many of my clients. I work with both children and adults, and this is very common. And personally, this is how I had felt my whole life, that it was my fault, that there was something wrong with me.
Mm.
And I think we tell ourselves that in a way because it gives us a false sense of control. If I can tell myself that it's my fault, that I'm the issue, and that my sexual or my abuser sexually abused me because of a problem with me, then it gives me some sense of power and some sense of control. And then that's where we go on sort of these self-destructive tangents where we are cutting, we are using drugs, we are drinking because we hate ourselves for what happened. It makes us feel like we're in control. It would be too heinous for us to imagine a world that exists in which we had no control over such a violating, horrific crime, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It must be, from a child's perspective, an horrific, traumatic event when they realize it wasn't supposed to happen, or when it's really bad abuse and it's actually physical hurting them. Not just a little fondling, which is bad enough, but sometimes I've seen it as a dermatologist in the hospital, children that had been brutally raped.
Yes.
Babies. Oh my God, how can anybody do that? What a trauma, physically and emotionally, they go through. And you deal with all that in your practice. My respect to you.
I do. I deal with all of that in my practice. Thank you. Your kind words are not lost on me. I really enjoy what I do, which sounds a little bit twisted, but when I can help see people to a place where they are thriving and in healthy relationships and have healthy sex lives, to me, it makes it all worth it.
Yeah. So Phoenix out of the ashes, and you grew up being abused, and now you help others that they at least don't abuse their children and prevent, hopefully, others from being abused. What a wonderful development, and how wonderful to do that. Let's go back. When did you first realize that really what you have is trauma, that it's trauma?
So that's a very interesting story. So I had no idea. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I had a history of trauma, I would have been like, no. Because I think the general consensus is that trauma and PTSD are saved for one category of people, which is those who fight in the war, right? Those who go to war. A lot of people associate PTSD with, with veterans. And so I had no idea. But what I did have was a raging eating disorder, very, very sick, always fluctuating, like up and down 100 pounds, up 100, down 100, which is a significant amount of weight and takes a toll on the body in itself. So, right, what was I doing? I was punishing myself. Subconsciously, I was punishing myself for all of the abuse that I had endured. I met my now husband and we got married. And we got married in 2018. And shortly after that, I started to have memories, and they were not whole memories. They were little snippets, little screenshots. I often use the analogy. It's like somebody mailing you a single puzzle piece.
Good one.
When you wake up in the morning and go check your mail, and you have no idea what kind of puzzle this is, how many pieces there are, when the next one is coming. You just have this singular puzzle piece.
And it probably makes you feel awful.
Awful.
Look at it.
Very confused. And of course, the first thought is, I'm crazy. I have lost my mind, right? Because it's that sense of control. Well, if I'm crazy, I would rather be crazy than have this be true. So that's really how it started for me. It was after I had moved out of my home and was in a house with a partner who was very, very safe. I created a really safe foundation for myself and a safe life. And it was then that the memories started to surface because I was ready. I was ready to know.
That's interesting. Yeah. It didn't come out until you were ready to know. Wow.
And the brain is amazing. It protects us in so many ways.
Absolutely. And brain is the most fascinating organ there is.
Yes.
It is mind-boggling how often survivors, especially of childhood trauma, do not remember anything until later on. And I think even in the justice system, but generally in population, oh, she didn't remember it, so now she's making it up.
Ugh.
And it's just not true.
It's just not true. And it's infuriating. One of my abusers, I did go to the authorities for, and I remember in that moment after they had done an investigation on him, ultimately, I could not remember quite enough for them to be able to follow through with charging him. And the police officer had said,
pick out his private parts out of a lineup. Is that it?
Right. Right. Exactly. Like, let's just, right. Let me try to pick him out of a lineup. Right. And that's the kind of evidence you need. And I remember when she called me and she said to me, well, I get that you might be upset, but you wouldn't want me to throw his whole life away over something that may or may not be true.
But he threw your life away, and that's okay?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
What did you feel in that moment?
Rage. It took me a while to be fully in touch with my rage. My eating disorder helped suppress a lot of that. I think anytime I would feel anger, I would binge. And when I would binge, then I would be sick. So then the rage would just sort of go away, be suppressed. But I felt so much rage. And at the time, I actually was working with the police department and working with police officers was too triggering for me. I did not at that moment branch out into full-time private practice. And I think after the police officer called me and said what she said to me on the phone, I was done. And I think I dove 110% into launching my private practice, launching my podcast. I channeled my rage effectively.
Wow. So why is it that some people after a traumatic event develop PTSD? And maybe you should elaborate for those people, how does it feel to have PTSD? Besides, people know there's often flashbacks, memories that make people feel anxious and uncomfortable, but there's so much more, especially to complex PTSD. But how do we get it? And what does it look like?
I think that's a really important question because it's very important to note that not everybody who endures some type of trauma will develop PTSD. It's not a sure thing. The difference between those who develop PTSD and those who don't can range from a variety of different things. Genetics also have a lot to do with it. We know this. But also it's about the support that you have in that moment. If you get the help that you need, if you are supported by friends and family and loved ones and believed, you are so much less likely to develop symptoms of PTSD because you don't question it. You know what happened, you go through the grieving process, you feel all the feelings, and then you're able to more easily move on with your life. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
For the kids, you would say it is that they're probably getting it easier because they're just not believed often. What about for first responders and veterans? I believe they witnessed a horrendous accident, somebody decapitated in front of them or something like that. And some people get over it in some way and others they can't. What's the difference?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I also think that boils down to genetics, and it also boils down to, does this person have a history of trauma? Right before even serving in the military, let's say, right? If we're going with the example for somebody who serves in the military, what was their life like before? Have they been told their whole lives? A lot of times as adults, we've grown up with this narrative that we get passed down to us from the adults in our lives, that our voice doesn't matter, that children are to be seen and not heard. And when we become adults with that belief that we are to be seen and not heard, we're so much more likely to develop PTSD than somebody else who's been validated their whole lives, who has been, no family is perfect. I won't sit here and say that, there's the perfect family out there. Absolutely not. But there's a big difference. And I think that genetics, along with how people were raised and what their childhood looks like, plays into it a lot.
Yeah, and some people call it the landscape or the brain reserve. I think that's the same concept. If somebody has trauma pre-existing, it makes them vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And you're so right. So you developed an eating disorder, and it's not rare, because some people develop an eating disorder like bulimia, anorexia, or even obesity is an eating disorder, because some people cover up their abuse by food. So they think when they're really fat, nobody will want them. So they are protected from having to have sex, which is the feared modality. So
absolutely.
How do you heal now, really, if you have an eating disorder in this diet-obsessed world where you go on the video and you see the retouched, perfect people that look like Twiggy, and you see, oh, I have to look like them to be anything.
Yeah. Yes. So how do you begin to recover from that?
How do you begin to, and how do you do it, and how did you do it? Oh, I get it. I get to you. Do I?
Very difficult in this diet obsessed world. And one of the first things that I do when people come into my office and they come to me and let's take like binge eating disorder, because I think that binge eating disorder is very prominent in this world. And there's so much stigma attached because of fat phobia that people don't speak about it. So I will have people who come into my office and will say, I don't know why I can't stop binging. And one of the first things I say is, well, who are you following on social media? Let's talk about that. Because you spend so much of your time on social media, and if not social media, then television. So who are you looking at right now that's making you feel like who you are is not enough?
That's a good one.
And I always find, I think that's the first step, is let's not infiltrate our social media feeds and our lives with people who are constantly talking about, never miss a Monday working out, or, get fit, or, detox this, diet that. No, let's get rid of that. And then here are some people you can add that are more intuitive eating based and exercise for enjoyment based, instead of exercise because you want to punish yourself for having fat on your body. So it's typically one of the very first step I do right out of the gate.
I love that. I really do, because it is so much more important to change that destructive, really, body image.
So destructive. When you're looking at somebody, when you're on social media 25 times a day, when you click that Instagram button and the first thing you see is a picture of somebody who is a weight that may be healthy for them, maybe not, but just because it's healthy for them doesn't mean anything about what's healthy for you. But as soon as you see that, you think, I have to be like that. I have to be like that. And it's like, no, let's remove that right from the get-go.
And especially young people, they tend to so much compare themselves with everybody there on social media. It just makes them unhappy. I feel bad.
It does. It really does.
And especially if there was trauma, often people feel so guilty and ashamed about having endured that, especially when it comes to private. And I find in North America, people are especially prude. Me being from Germany, funny story, I went in the sauna here, being from Germany. I sat on my towels, butt naked, and somebody opened the door. It was a women's sauna. In Germany, we have mixed saunas. Now here's women's sauna. Fine. So I sat on my towel, didn't think of nothing. Somebody came in, back out. And I thought, oh my God. I mean, I'm not pretty naked, but I'm not that bad. I'm not a green monster.
Right.
And
you didn't need to scream like that. Jeez.
I told my best friend, and she said, you did what? And I said, yeah. Aren't you supposed to be naked? And it's, no, you have to have at least a bikini or something. And I said, really? So from then on, I put a towel over me too, for respect for the other people. But that's what I'm saying. There's a guilt and shame part.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, isn't that so interesting? Because that just goes to show you how much we have come to sexualize nudity.
Yeah.
Right? Like your body can't just be a body.
Yeah.
And like, why can't we sit in the sauna naked? Why do we have to wear a bikini? Bodies are not inherently sexual.
No.
Like, why are we horrified by seeing another naked body? It seems silly to me.
It seems silly, and especially being from I grew up in Germany until I was 38. Then I came to Canada. I live here now for the last 23 years. So I've seen both sides. And as a young girl, I was with my parents in nudist camps. And everybody ran around with nothing on. And we bathed in the lakes with nothing on. And the only time when we put a bottom on was when we sat down to eat. For hygiene reasons, makes sense. But nobody looked. Nobody, the men, women, they were all around. And some were pretty, most were not. But who cares?
Right. A body is a body.
But the only thing in those campsites, single men were not allowed. So there's a pointer.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because they must have had trouble with single men looking at single girls.
Right. And sexualizing them in a place where you're just meant to be nude without the sexual connotations.
Enjoying your body.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that is interesting. So I think from a psychological standpoint, but let's go back to guilt and shame and trauma, because it makes it even worse when you are sexually abused in North America. And then comes that cultural, everything that goes on down below on your body is shameful.
Yes.
You can't talk about it.
Yes, you can't talk about it. And we're taught to just constantly cover up. And in a way that almost makes us disconnect from our bodies even more, because there's never really a time where it's okay to just be with your body without needing some article of clothing on.
That's true. And even little girls, they wear bikini. In Europe, I had no top until I was 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Nobody thought about it.
Nobody thought twice about it.
3 years older than I, until he was 6 or so, we were on the beach completely with nothing. Here, you couldn't see a small child without at least the bottom. Interesting.
Yeah, it really is.
So that's just something about guilt and shame, how cultural determined it is. Now let's go back to PTSD that you're seeing every day. How can somebody that had a serious trauma, and there's many people that do, start in their recovery? What can they do? Because there is recovery out there. It's not hopeless, isn't it?
Yeah, not at all. And I think it's, I am a therapist, and I think that therapy is a wonderful thing and can be very helpful. But I also think there's so much more to trauma recovery, because trauma affects your entire nervous system. It affects the subconscious mind. It affects parts of you that you don't even always have access to. So I really think that, try to find somebody to talk to. and be relentless in the search. Just because you sit down and meet with one person and you don't feel like it clicks doesn't mean you're stuck with that person. If you don't feel safe with that person, move on to the next one. It's a bit like an interview process. You're the client interviewing the therapists.
Good tip. Very true. I did it myself when I recovered from my severe depression, and I didn't have much choice then, but it is very important to find somebody that resonates with you.
Yes.
And that is one factor why many therapists even offer a trial session, say, let's see if I can help you.
Right.
And
let's see if this is a good fit, because not
Yeah.
everybody is a good fit. And there are, I think trauma and PTSD is somewhat trendy right now. And I do believe that there are people out there who are marketing themselves incorrectly as trauma, PTSD therapists. So, if it doesn't feel right for you, move on.
Yeah, and
It's as
maybe
simple as
check the
that.
background too, because I've seen people with the marketing background that call themselves PTSD coach or whatever. It's maybe not a good fit.
Not a good fit. Absolutely. Check the background. And I've always found that one red flag, at least for me in my search, when I was looking for a therapist is, oftentimes when you look, the therapist will have a list of things that he, she, or they specialize in. And if every single thing under the sun is on that list, that's usually a red flag, right? Because none of us can specialize in everything. So if you're looking at a list and this person is saying that they specialize in trauma, eating disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, seasonal affective disorder, it's like, oh, red flag.
I can help you. What's your problem?
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. And there's a difference between coaches again and therapists. And some coaches feel that therapists don't know what they're doing, or they just work with the past, and it's just not true. But there's differences between therapists too. And there's differences between coaches. And some coaches like myself work as coaches because they just didn't get a license in North America for some reason. I was a physician in Germany, but I don't get a license in North America because I was sick. No longer, but it's too late. So you look at the background. It's so important. There's excellent coaches. There's more excellent therapists. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And I tend to believe that both therapists and coaches, because I do think there is a little bit of a silent battle between therapists and coaches.
Absolutely.
I believe that we can both learn from each other. Absolutely. I think that coaches have things to offer about some more present day healing, and therapists have other things that they can offer. I think we could learn from each other. I really do.
I am always for collaboration in all areas of medicine. I always say health and healing is always teamwork. I've not met a single person that had a complicated illness, not just a broken finger, that only needed one person to get them well.
Exactly.
I haven't seen that person. And when somebody says, oh, I can heal you, run. Unless it's God and you're dying. Okay, maybe that's...
Exactly.
I shouldn't laugh about that. For some people, that's very serious. I like to chuckle.
Oh, yes. It's humor therapy. That's one of my favorite specialties. I specialize in humor therapy.
I love that. A good belly laugh. Laughter is the best medicine. When I was still working as a physician, I always found something to laugh about. And I have my favorite jokes that I share with my client when it's appropriate.
I love it. I love that.
Yeah. But getting back to PTSD, which really is your specialty, what can happen if it gets untreated or undertreated?
Yes. So this is why it is so important to not ignore it, because it leads to a whole host, as I touched on earlier, trauma doesn't just affect, one part of you. It affects the entire nervous system, the entire brain. Folks with PTSD, truly, if you took a scan of their brain and you looked at somebody who did not have PTSD, their brain would look completely different.
Yes, and as a licensed Dr. Amen brain professional, I know his SPECT scans, and he has SPECT scans where you can identify PTSD and differentiate it from depression, anxiety, and, for example, traumatic brain injury.
Yes.
It's fascinating. So the brain scans show that there's a physical substance to it. It's not just in your head. You're not just imagining it.
Yeah, you are not imagining it. It is a very real illness. And if left untreated, it leads to suicide attempts or suicide completions. It leads to unsatisfactory relationships. It leads to increased levels of chronic depression, increased levels of chronic anxiety, heightened cortisol levels in your body, which is the stress hormone, which over a period of time has a devastating effect on your body. It can lead to heart issues. It can lead to, people turning to substance abuse. I mean, so many things can happen.
Diabetes, Alzheimer's, they all have to do with the constant stress that a PTSD puts on you. And we even had here in Nova Scotia, you probably didn't heard of it. It was a veteran who had PTSD and did not get the help he needed in time. He ended up committing homicide, killed his family. A very tragic event. And it is important to get PTSD treated. And please, if anybody listens, reach out for help. I know it's hard, but it's so worth it.
It's so hard, but it's harder to live a life in a constant state of being traumatized.
Yeah. And it's important, everybody that had emotional pain, and I'm one of them, I nearly committed suicide twice. And I know what emotional pain feels like. And people don't see it. They don't know it. It can't be easily treated. And most of the medications that are available just reduce it a little bit and cover it up a little bit.
Yes, it's essentially like kind of sweeping things under the rug.
Yeah. It's the same as if you're stepping on a nail and you take a towel. No, you don't feel the pain, but the nail is still there. So it's important.
Nail is still there.
When you have that, you need to work with a psychotherapist or similar practitioner, psychiatrist, to get it sorted out and get a good treatment plan. And that's so important.
Yes.
Now, what are some of the tools that are your favorites when you're working with your clients?
So definitely the social media. Let's change what we're looking at on social media. In terms of recovery from PTSD, some of my favorite tools are just keeping it simple, because when you first begin this work, it can feel so overwhelming that I think a lot of times when people just dive right in, they become so overwhelmed that they shut down and they say, I can't do this. And then they don't do it. So I'm really a big fan of the little things and very like somatic experiences. So, what can you do to regulate your nervous system a little bit? One of the biggest tips I will give is, hey, do you have Epsom salt? All right. You know what you're going to do? You're going to fill up your tub with Epsom salt and you're going to sit in it for 15 minutes, because Epsom salt, right? Folks who have depression and anxiety, which always goes hand in hand with PTSD, tend to be deficient in magnesium. And what is in Epsom salt? Magnesium. And it's best absorbed.
Sulfate, and the sulfur is important too. It's
exactly
a godsend, Epsom salt. I love it.
Yes, it's a godsend, and it is best absorbed through the skin. And you can go online, you can buy a bag, or you can buy it in any of your local stores.
And how about a few drops of lavender essential oil? The smell goes directly to your limbic system.
Yes, it's amazing. And they make Epsom salts now that are infused with essential oils. So Dr. Teal's makes a lavender infused one. And then I also have right now the eucalyptus infused.
Lavender is known to help with anxiety, depression. There are good controlled studies about it.
Yes.
I think there's nothing nicer than a nice, not bubble bath, Epsom salt bath with lavender, maybe a few candles, and some of your favorite calm music, not hard rock, but maybe Mozart or something similar.
Exactly. And, you know, I also want to point out that I do know for some folks, and this, including myself at one point in my life, baths were too triggering. Some people have a really hard time, you know, like we were talking about earlier, just sitting with their bodies, being naked, that alone can be triggering. So if a bath is too triggering, I will also recommend get some Epsom salt, pour it in a cup, bring the cup in the shower, and then scoop some in your hand while you're in the shower and rub it over your body like an exfoliant. And that can feel really good as well.
Yeah. And it has the effect that
like you're hugging yourself.
you're hugging
Yeah.
yourself, and it makes you more likely to love yourself. That is so lovely. So wrapping that up, what are 1 or 2 tips that somebody that may have a trauma that you can leave them with before you share how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah. So tip number 1, I think, would be to, again, be relentless in your pursuit for healing, because healing does not look the same on everybody. And what worked for me will not work for you, which might not work for somebody else. There are so many things out there that you can do to heal. Healing doesn't just take place in a 1-hour therapy session. So know that that is tip number 1. Tip number 2, and I think that this is the most important one, and this is something that I needed and some days still need to tell myself over and over again, which is to not make permanent decisions based off of temporary emotions. Write that down, put it on a Post-it note, put it on your mirror, put it in your kitchen, because when you get into that state where your nervous system is triggered, or if you are feeling increasingly depressed, those dark thoughts come in, those suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts creep in, thoughts of being reckless. I'm going to get my car and I'm going to drive, way over the speed limit, and we'll just see what happens. Wait it out. Wait it out. Wait until the next day. Do not make a permanent decision based off emotions, which are absolutely temporary. So that would be my second tip.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And as you mentioned in your bio, it's important that people realize that they too are worthy of healing and happiness in the aftermath of trauma.
You're worth it.
So Alyssa, if somebody really likes you and wants to work with you, how can they reach you and listen to your podcast?
Sure. So the best way to get in touch with me, if people want to check out the podcast, it's called Light After Trauma. And that can be found really wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you want to learn more about my podcast, that can just be found on my website, which is lightaftertrauma.com. If somebody is looking to work with me on an individual level in private practice, my other website for my private practice is just my first name and last name. It's alyssascolari.com.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And under the video, I will share those links, and in the podcast notes, of course, so people can have a way of finding you if they liked it and want to learn more about how it would feel to work with you. Maybe
thank you so much.
That would be a way to get them the help they so yearn for. And please, any of you, if you are currently struggling with suicide or homicide, don't wait. Reach out to someone, call 911, go to the emergency room, talk to your friends and neighbors. Don't just do it, like Alyssa said. Don't make a permanent decision based on temporary emotions.
Yes.
And with that, I wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.